Lynae, welcome to the Claima Stories podcast. We're so excited to have you here in Portland, Oregon. I know you came a long way. How was that flight? That flight was, just a little bit.
Honestly, I might not ever do it again.
Wait, why you gotta do us like that?
It was rough.
It was rough.
I think I'll lean into the connecting flight business if I ever have to come back to Portland, or at least do it on a stop to somewhere else.
I think the one-stop thing is overrated. I get bored on them planes. I get uncomfortable.
It was rough.
Sit well. It's not for me. It ain't for everybody.
It's not. It's not, and I learned the hard way.
You learned the hard way. How's your morning going?
It's going good. I'm still on East Coast time, so it's afternoon for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wait, it's already afternoon for you. That's
for
right.
Me.
Because we are in the AM over here. But you adjusted.
Yeah.
As much as you can. Well, we love to have conversations at the intersection of what your experience has been growing up, coming up, but also how that connects to what you do today and the purpose oriented and behind the work that you do, your creativity, your process. All a part of this means to inspire the next generation, inspire our peers, and create this community and network where we're shaping and inspiring and bringing each other along. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your family, though, as we jump into that. And so I know, your mother's from Mississippi, father's from South Carolina. They met in the Navy, right? Sometimes military households have stereotypes to them as far as the strictness and the rigidness of them. What was it like in your household early on?
Wow. Well, first, my dad's from North Carolina. They met in South Carolina. But when you think about it, like, my dad was very strict. He had his set of rules. And literally the thing that comes to mind is that we had to fold towels a very specific way.
Really?
You had to fold them hamburger style, hot dog style, and then give me a 3-part crease. And that is how we folded towels. And I remember specifically because my older brother came to visit once and folded towels like some kind of way. My dad was like, "That's not what we do in this house." But I think that's how they folded towels on the ship. But it was very interesting. My mother actually, I was a Similac baby because my mother had to go on tour as soon as she had me. She actually told me the story of my birth and her experience in the military like a couple weeks ago. So the details are a bit fuzzy, but she said women were having such a hard time in the military that a lot of them were getting pregnant on purpose to get out. And so she was actually with my father. He was a superior rank than she was, and they got pregnant. And the officer she reported to felt as though she got pregnant on purpose. And so as soon as she had me, not very long after I had to go live with family in Mississippi, he sent her on a tour. And he sent her on a tour on a different ship than she was previously stationed on, but she was also even more of a minority on this ship. So it was a much smaller percentage of women on these ships. Wow. And that's actually where she was exposed to something very specific, sexual harassment at work in the military, being called MST, military sexual trauma. And so it was really rough for her, and she had to write a letter to her congressman to be honorably discharged from the Navy.
Wow.
So she only spent 8 years. She didn't get a chance to retire, but that was her way of finding an opportunity to come home, raise her kids. And so I say that to say I had to bounce around a lot. After spending that year in Mississippi, I spent a year in North Carolina because my parents were both still overseas. And I believe there were breaks and points in time where they came to see me.
I was going to say, like, how often were you able to see them?
I was very young, so I'm not even really sure. But we settled in Virginia. And spent some time there. And, the military is touted to have all these benefits. It's really an escape for Black people without a lot of options, especially in the 60s and the 70s. The 70s and the 80s. So my parents had to have like a side job.
Yeah, because they also had to figure out how to cover the bills, take care of you and siblings.
Correct. So I spent quite a bit of my time in the care of others. So
was it like grandparents or aunties, cousins, or family?
All that.
What, outside of kind of the moving around a bit, how else did that military lifestyle kind of influence your life and how you navigate life in general?
You gotta do what you gotta do what you want to do. That was like the mantra, kind of unspoken, and it became spoken later in life when I started to make decisions about what I wanted to do with my career and where I wanted to go to school. But not succeeding wasn't an option, and it wasn't even an option that I considered.
Not succeeding wasn't an option?
But it was, again, one of those unspoken rules.
You kind of just felt it from maybe not what your parents were saying, but just kind of how they were acting and directing, and they were like, you got to make it.
And being very independent, being left to myself a lot. I just knew that I had to take care of myself, and that's always been how I navigated through life. And so thankfully, like, school came easy to me. Academics came easy to me. That wasn't an issue. Praise God, I got this full ride to go to Spelman, but it was also, I could just take care of myself. And I went to school for things I knew I would be good at, things I was passionate about, but never really career oriented. And so that was the bit of uncertainty that underlied, like, I'm going to get into school, I'm going to be successful, but like, what next?
What next?
Yeah.
What am I going to do to be successful? How do you define that?
Yeah.
Did your parents ever provide us, like, any specifics around what that looked like for them to you? Like, you know, Lynae, you need to be a doctor, or you need to, you know, make a certain amount of money.
No, and I think my performance in school made it so they didn't worry about that, but there was an expectation that I focused and I did well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that wasn't always communicated in the best way. My parents, what I've learned now, and I feel like a lot of people our age are learning now, is that parents are people who learn about themselves. Yes.
They have no idea.
They don't know what they're doing.
Experts. Yeah.
They have no idea what they're doing probably ever, but go through these series of change and metamorphosis and learning about themselves. And so, you know, emotional availability wasn't abundant in my home. And it manifested in different ways. Me and my mother have always been close, even though that relationship had to morph into something more healthy over time. And myself and my father at this stage in my life are having a much healthier relationship, I think. But again, it was in the unspoken things that I knew I had to take care of myself. It was in the interactions that didn't make me feel psychologically safe. I realized I had to take care of myself. So, yeah.
Do you feel, in your experience since, in your life experience since, do you feel like that's unique to you, or have you found that to be a common thing amongst other Black people, other folks that may be immigrants, etc.? Like, have you come across that?
Yeah, it's very common. Very few far in between do we have super well-adjusted peers. You know, I actually just took a trip with some of my girlfriends for my birthday, and we had crazy girls just literally had this session of sharing trauma. And my best friend just sort of sat back because she didn't have any stories to tell necessarily. And it was always also the running joke in school that she was the most sane out of everybody. And I talked with her as we were waiting on our plane to get back, and I said, you know, I can see a measure of growth in all of our friends except you. Not that you haven't grown, because you have, but there was never an area, an insecurity that manifested outwardly for you, as there might have been for the rest of us that we grew through.
Absolutely.
And she said, and it really like put a light bulb in my head about how few people I know like this. And she said, well, I came up in a household where I was affirmed, where I was listened to, where I was believed, where I could talk to my parents about anything. And as like, you know, I think her parents were divorced. But because of that, she tries and finds, what's the word?
Confidence or comfort?
Not necessarily confidence, but she makes it her business to be a safe space for her friends that might not have had safe spaces before. And so when it comes to because we have bouts where we crying and just talking to each other like, I love you, girl, and I always believed in you. And yeah, my mama didn't say this, but I'm gonna say it for you. Like, she's always just sitting there engaging and being present and never feeling disconnected because she knows that's not common. So, yeah, I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people in color and young girls in particular, especially when we have brothers, Lord, no shade.
What you trying to say?
No shade, but there are so many expectations of us, and so few expectations, stipulations. on the boys, and we often have to play second mom sometimes, or we often have to put my brother to the side over Christmas. And I was like, I don't think you're ready. I love you dearly. I want you to have a good time. I'm not telling you not to have a good time, because he's going into his junior year next year, I think. But when it's a conversation about grades or what he's doing in school or how much money folks are sending him, I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Because my mom came up to the school one time. I was on at a HBCU. Before you pledge as a freshman, there are stroll teams for your dorm that you get to go and holler about and do dances and stuff. And we were doing some shows, a little sexy. And I told my mom earlier in the week that I wasn't feeling well. And she just popped up on a Friday and brought me some chili. And I had on like a little bra and a blazer, about to go to my little performance, get a phone call from my dad. I heard you up there, and you not acting like we raised you, and your grades slipping, and your hours slipping. I'm like, my grades are fine. My hours are exceeding. I'm just having fun. And these are the conversations my brothers are having, and so that's what I mean. Like, there's such a twist in dynamic.
Very different of how you're held accountable versus how he may not be held to a certain accountability. But it also speaks to, you talk about how you have to step in, right, and be a certain way with him, and it's a kind of a lot that happens with Black women. Like, y'all have this. Sometimes it's a burden. Maybe oftentimes it's a burden. Speaking of that, in Black women, I know you learned 2 years ago, right, about your mother and how she was actually picking cotton in Gluckstadt in Mississippi with her brothers and sisters. In the summertime. Was that new news to you? And how did you react to that?
I was flabbergasted. I was flabbergasted because where my family lives in Gluckstadt, a vast portion of it is land my grandfather's family owns.
Okay.
And so I've always known, like, the blue house sits in the center. My Aunt Fat had houses built, like more than one home built on land before, so she could stay close. My Grand Pearl was at the end of the street, and sprinkled in between was extended family I didn't know. But I always knew my grandfather was a farmer. One of my favorite memories, he would always have a bag of pecans for me. Always have a bag of pecans. And then when me and my cousins would be at the blue house, he would come, bring his pickup truck, and just cut us watermelon off the back and serve it. And so I knew he worked with the land, but I never knew what they were doing summer to summer. And so it was there. My oldest aunt was staying with us at the time, and they just got to talking about it. And not only did they pick cotton, they picked a lot of their foodstuffs. And so even when it came, it was just such a simpler time, but also what's crazy to me is that one thing that has always really inspired and propelled me is that even though my mother's family in particular never had a lot, they had a lot. And so in the midst of poverty, in the midst of systemic injustice, and that resulting in the way that they lived, there was so much love, there was so much food, there was always so much family, and that was my favorite place to be.
Yeah.
But I say that to say it was a simpler time, and it was so simple because of their limited access to things. But my grandma could wake up one morning and say, well, I'm making blackberry cobbler. It would be up to my aunts and uncles, my mom, to go pick blackberries. Fresh. And she said we would pick blackberries. We would sometimes get honeysuckle off the vine and just like drink it. But then on the other side of it, they was cleaning hogs from the rooter to the tutor and using every part of the hog for their food.
Right.
It's just such an interesting thing to like know about my mom, who's like very dainty, to come from these beginnings to where dainty wasn't an option. You got to get down and dirty.
You're in it
to have what you need. So
elbows, right.
It's very interesting. Something very peculiar. I almost didn't want to share it because it's embarrassing, but it is what it is. In the same conversation, you know how Black families get when they get to doing memories, they throw different things out.
Pulling stuff.
All of a sudden, you remember the dirt we used to eat? Dirt?
Dirt? We used to
what? And then like, yeah, it was sweet. We used to run our hand across the back of the truck. And I was like, Mom, don't tell nobody else that. And look at me saying that on the spot. But no, like, again, indication of a simpler time, and also just when the earth was clean.
Before we started putting all this stuff into the ground and the air, right? You touched on something I found super interesting when you were talking about your family. You're talking about your mother's side of the family in particular, about how they were growing up and they didn't have much, but they also had what they needed, and they were happy and felt secure.
11 kids.
11 kids. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is what was happening then versus now, and that they were actually happy versus like now we have access to so much. So much. We have access to almost everything at our fingertips, at least with the means that we have. But a lot of us aren't happy. Like, we have a mental health crisis in America right now.
Well, I will say happiness is relative. And finding joy might be the correct terminology because there was a lot of joy to be had, but there was still alcoholism. There was still sexual abuse happening. There was still depression and so many things people didn't have words for or time to invest in. Invest in interrogating or investigating to figure out how we could behave in healthier ways. But I mean, it's two sides to every coin. Like, the more you have, the more privileged you are, the less you're able to appreciate the simple things. And I think that's all it is.
Yeah, that's very well said. Like, it does seem like the more you acquire, the further you kind of get away from what's truly important to you. Speaking of what's important to you, I know you've been writing since a very young age. And I'm curious, professionally, how do you identify? Like, do you identify as a poet? Do you identify as a writer, creative, or just Lynae? Like,
I would have to say Lynae. I would have to say Lynae. My management, they're the ones who told me, well, you're a multi-hyphenate, meaning you do so many different things, and I do agree with that. But I would say part of my wheelhouse is writing. It's really important to me. I think curating stories is more what I identify with, whether that's through poetry, whether it's like I write scripts for the parking lot. People are always people are always surprised to hear that, and then I realize just how much people believe I shoot off the dome when I come to places, and they're like, we just want you to do your thing. No prep, no like material. We just want you to do your thing. And then we're both sitting in front of the camera like this. Because like I need material. Like I'm very observant. I study a lot. And I pull the puzzle pieces together to create a picture that makes sense. And that's just how I do any and everything, whether it's developing the shows that I've pitched or that I'm working on, Parking Lot Pimpin every Friday. And that process within itself it can get taxing, it can get rough, but in order to maintain the integrity, I have to make sure I take time to sit down and write. Sometimes that's a Thursday night before Friday. Sometimes it's a Friday morning at 6 a.m. But I've got to make sure that I do it, because I think another reason why people love it so much is because it is thoughtful. And people feel like there's value in being able to spout things off like it's impressive. And I guess it could be. Like, if you could do what I do,
off
like,
the dome,
out of this world. I hate to say it, and I hope I don't sound ridiculous. But me and God are in conversation about everything that I do. And there are times when I feel like I'm exhausted and I don't have the words, and I ask God for the words. But it's so important to create something that is such an experience for the people who view it. And it's such a responsibility that for me, it has to be written down. It has to be, I can literally write lines, and my process is I'll write exactly what I'm thinking. Then I'll jump down, I'll write a few more words. I'll pull some research and I'll copy and paste it underneath this. And then I'll literally move it around in like a puzzle. I'll literally move it around like a puzzle and then rewrite everything in the voice that is associated with the parking lot. So it hits everything that it needs to hit as much as you can in 3 to 5 minutes. I definitely want to come back to that, but I also want to revisit the fact that you published a book when you were mad young. It was a poetry book, Why you say it like that? What was it about? Like, what happened? Got to give myself credit, I guess, but it was a school assignment. So going to school in Virginia, we had primary school, intermediate school, and then middle school.
Intermediate?
Yeah. So
Okay.
primary school was K through second, intermediate was 3 through 5, and then you went to middle school. So in each one of those grades, I don't know if this school in particular had this program, but it gave students the opportunity to publish a book. And in third grade, we were learning about poetry, and that's what we had to write. And I was getting so many compliments on my book. I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And it was several poems about several things, like a third grader would write about. I remember one was about like a cat or something. But in fifth grade, I went back to poetry because I felt like that was my thing. And then sixth grade, I actually won a competition and got published in a book. But using words creatively, I use this phrase. I did a show, and we had a chat after the show. It was a poetry show. And I said, poets are the transmitters of experience. And I got that. I understood that. I didn't understand all those words, couldn't spell half them words at that age, but I knew the impact of how poetry made people feel.
Right.
And I was very into continuing to practice that.
It's crazy to be able to find something at that age, and whether you knew it at that time or not, and it still be a part of, your process today, a part of like your toolbox today. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was in your experience growing up, have you ever experienced feeling like you were othered or outsider, right? Just because of maybe your interest in poetry or in creative or in arts, but maybe other reasons, appearance or whatnot. And how did you deal with that? How did that manifest itself?
Other is my life story. Other is my life story. Poetry itself was a risk because anytime you put yourself on a stage or share your, like, Erykah Badu was right. We artists and we sensitive about our shit.
Hell yeah.
Anytime you share that with people, you open yourself up to ridicule. And I think I was just like a creative spirit because the way that I experimented with the way that I dressed, with the way that I wore my hair, with the type of things I involved myself in, the type of ways I expressed those things. And I didn't always have the support system that I needed. And
you mean like immediate friend circles or even at home? Like what was the...
A little bit of both. I didn't always have the support system I needed at home. Like I said, emotional availability and psychological safety weren't prioritized in my home. Because also when you come from the South, like I just said, you have very little energy to invest
in those things.
Yeah. And like it's also, I just came across my timeline, Denzel's scene in Fences. That was like, I don't gotta like you. It's my duty to take care of you. That, whether it's expressed so harshly, that was a state of mind for a lot of our grandparents.
Yes.
Like, it's my duty to take care of you, and that's how I'm gonna show you love.
Yeah.
I don't even like using the word love.
Yeah, I'm not gonna tell you.
It's a little crazy.
I'm not gonna be up here hugging you every day. I'm not gonna be holding your hand through all these things.
Yeah,
but,
so I think my parents made an effort to be better than that, but still not having had it modeled for them, not necessarily knowing how to show it to us. And so that was that at home, and because of that, really left a lot to my own devices, trying to figure out myself. And when I was very young, I actually experienced sexual abuse myself, like childhood sexual abuse. Wow. And that really set me on a path of people pleasing in a way, and putting myself in the boxes I thought I should fit in order to get attention that wasn't so negative, that wasn't so like traumatizing, and so that manifests in a lot of maladaptive ways. And it took me really, I remember my senior year in high school is when I just decided, like, I'm gonna be myself, no matter what people think. And
was there like a transformative experience that happened during high school that you're like, I can't create these different personas or the facade, like I gotta just do me?
I think I just got tired of rejection. And I recently said at a show, someone said, what if we don't have the support system? I said, well, you might, but you also might be chasing after a support system that you want, or that you think is desirable, or you think makes you better than who you are or what you are at base. And so I remember I went to prom. There was this, I'm younger. I skipped a grade, so I'm younger than everyone in my class.
So you smart.
Yeah. But there was this boy, and it's always the ones that wanted you the whole time that will just treat you like you crazy by the time you give him a chance. Yeah. But anywho, so, he had always been flirting with me. I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend until I was 16, so I never really had any real relationships. But I actually asked this other guy to take me to the prom, and he was a popular guy who took interest in me. And he said, yeah, for sure. And I was like, oh, well, you got to meet my dad. Literally came to a week before the prom. I'm not finna meet your daddy. That's crazy. Took his ex-girlfriend to the prom.
Get out of here.
So anywho, I have a conversation with this boy who's always been like, flirting with me or expressing that he liked me. And I said, well, we can go together if you like. And together means I meet you there. Because it's a week in advance. You ain't meet my daddy. That's not happening.
That's not happening yet.
But I get to prom. And he's like, oh, I'm just hanging out with my friends. And it was a sobering experience for me. And I'm just like, man, nobody's going to love you like you need to be loved, because you have to find that, here.
That's powerful.
And, love is strong, so I'm not looking for love, out of these prom dates. But, the way that I give, the way that I am in friendship with people, I'm a ride for you. But nobody was riding for me. And I had one close friend. We're no longer friends anymore. But even in her riding for me, it was heavily based on what I could do for her and in support of her, not necessarily monetary gain or whatever, but just how I made her feel. And it wasn't until my adulthood that I realized that. And like I said, we are unfortunately no longer as close as we once were. But if there was any transformative experience, it was just me being tired of looking in the wrong places and wanting to look inside. Yeah. So,
That's sometimes a very hard thing to do. Because there's hurt, there's traumas you've experienced, that you mentioned, and that's not always an easy thing to want to face, to even walk through, to even pull up after you maybe have, kind of buried it in there. There's this Brittany Cooper book,
Brittany,
Eloquent Rage, and she says something about some of the relationships that hurt Black girls the most are being rejected by other Black girls. It sounds like there's a relatability in their last relationship you were talking about. And I wanted to ask you, how do you overcome something like that?
I think you pinpoint where it starts, because if you're feeling rejected, it means there was something about that person that drew you to them. And the rejection is a letdown. It's you can't have access to this. And I think for me, it was really a confidence piece. Being someone, like I said, who didn't have the best support system, who experienced these things at a very young age, in very formative years. Confidence was something that I so desperately wanted. And I think when you begin to make the decision to look inward for all the things you're looking for on the outside, Beyonce said it best, and You Won't Break My Soul. She said, searching for love, searching for something that lives inside me. Once you find it, you are less inclined to need it, to need to be in association with it from someone else. And that's when like minds begin to come together. I have some of the best friendships now that I've ever had in my entire life. I don't have a day one. I don't have an A1 day one, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Because who I have,
really
top tier.
You right now. You know what I mean?
Top tier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think overcoming it looks like introspection and loving what you see. And loving what you see and honoring what you see. Really, me getting out in the parking lot and practicing the courage to put myself, fully me, the things I'm passionate about, because people didn't want to hear about Black shit before 2020. They heard about all the Black shit they needed to hear about.
Right.
Even my high school students would come to class.
That's right, you were a teacher.
The first day of their class, and they saw that I was about to actually teach them something. They'd be like, so I just got put in here. I ain't signed up for this. I already know everything I need to know about Black history, so I'm just going to switch out. And I'm like, okay. Wait for them to switch out if they could. Most times they couldn't.
They couldn't.
And then 2 months in, hey man, Miss Bowles, I just want to say I'm so glad that I stayed. You know, taught me so many things. But yeah, a lot of people have that attitude, especially on the internet. Internet's a happy place. I don't want to feel like.
Yeah, I want you to feel like you're telling me stuff that's gonna make me, feel a certain way about it. I just want, I just want
like
to watch.
You're begging me to be woke.
I want to watch somebody dancing. I want to watch this little skit. I don't want to watch none of that.
So, but that's also just who I am. Like that's something that I'm really passionate about, that I love learning about and sharing that knowledge. But anywho, that endeavor to just go for it, to do it in spite of being scared, to do it in spite of feeling like I'm gonna look stupid. That was me honoring the little girl in me. It was really like a inner child therapy project to build an internet presence, period.
Yeah.
And it ended up being something, your gift makes room for you, and also your gift isn't just for you.
It's not for you.
It's for so many people.
It's in service.
It's in service. And so literally it was just a step on a journey that I had to make to be able to share the messages with all the people who needed to hear it.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful what you said, because in doing that, right, that was a discomfort. But what you were realizing in that discomfort was you were actually having to attend to something that you have been dealing with since you were a child. And it was through that process of putting yourself out there that you're like, oh, I just discovered all these things about me. And I didn't know any of that was going to come in this process. It's a really a beautiful outcome.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you were a teacher. Did you and I know we had spoken about, you didn't necessarily know career-wise, like that's what you, where you wanted to end up, but that was one of the stops on the journey. How did you enjoy that experience? That was what, like 2018?
It was cool. Kids are annoying, especially high school kids who don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
I started teaching at the high school that I went to, actually.
Okay.
And being in a small town, I had a much quicker return on enthusiasm from those kids. I went to go teach at another school that was paying me more money, but it was very much in the mix of Atlanta. Everybody had half the school had famous mamas and daddies. Kids was pulling up to school in Teslas. And I'm driving my little Mazda 3.
Yeah, you whipping.
Crazy. It's crazy. But those kids were much more scared about looking crazy, So I enjoyed when I was able to get kids to let their guard down and really engage into the creativity. And they loved it. It mostly started from a place of, oh, Miss Brooks, I don't want to do this. But again, once it's done, oh, I'm glad you got me to get out my comfort zone and do this thing. So I really enjoyed it. It gave me purpose. And it also gave me something to work towards, because no school I taught at had a curriculum for Black Studies. I had to create it. I had to just...
School?
No school that I taught at.
That you taught at, yeah.
Yeah, had a curriculum. They had a class for it, but usually for somebody, like the kids told me, nobody would have signed up for this class because the guy before just had them watch movies and write papers.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And that's unfortunately how it is a lot, because the people who want to teach Black Studies may not have the academic background to give it the same honor as one of these core classes, or honor it in the same way. So it really felt good to get kids excited about us and creating tangible. At that school, the first school I taught at, I got us to do a Black History Spirit Week, where the first day was Heritage Day, and I had all the teachers dressing like kente cloths, and like even white teachers got in. This guy, he had on, what is it called, the kilt? Because he's Irish. He had on the kilt and all of his garb. A lot of the teachers who were Indian had on their traditional dress. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. We had Black Panther Day. Kids was walking around in froze and glasses. So that was fun. And I brought that to the second school as well. But at that first school, I got my class to create this, basically this social science fair, to where their final project was doing research, doing like a literature review, doing questions and case studies like around school about particular topics. And then instead of having these trifold boards that you remember from science fairs in school, I had them create like murals of their research.
Oh, that's beautiful. Along
the walls, and invited different classes to come by and let them present their things. And so it was really cool. I got to do so many creative things, but that school was not paying me enough.
I mean, that's the whole problem with this whole thing. It's like we have amazing folks that want to teach, but America's so behind on
Yeah.
You know, properly compensating teachers. I mean, especially, I even think about what teachers went through over COVID. Mm-hmm. And I'm like,
It
what?
was rough.
It was rough.
At the school I was at, I don't think I was the first person to go, but after I left, so many teachers quit.
Yeah.
So many teachers quit because our safety and security was especially in Georgia, behind ragged ass Brian Kemp, who was friends with the hot Cheeto in charge.
Yep. Hot Cheeto.
Was doing everything to get kids back in the building despite a major pandemic. And you had teachers who did not have options. I was really grateful and blessed to be able to have another outlet to go and like sustain my lifestyle. But you had teachers come and set up shower curtains around their desks because there was no other like protocol in place. Or, safety, we had like cleaning materials, but there weren't any extensive safety measures, and you want to bring kids back in school.
That's not gonna work.
And then like teachers I remember the language was so microaggressive and nasty that even when I quit, the principal asked to see me, and he was like, and I'm just so, I support you. You're scared. You think you'll get sick. What?
I'm like, what? I'm not think.
I can say the N-word?
Yeah, you say what you want.
Niggas are dying.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
What are we talking about?
Ridiculous.
Wow.
Had one lady in my department next to me. Her husband had COVID. They told her to come to school the next day. She got sick, stayed home, and they called her like hour on hour. What does your test say? What does your test say? Oh, your test says negative. You can come back. What? Y'all are crazy. I'm out of here.
So I'm guessing this experience is happening. What's starting to happen, as you think about outlets and you think about maybe your next move, is this when Parking Lot Pimpin is starting to come into
Parking Lot
play,
Pimpin.
or was it already in play?
It was in play.
Okay.
It was in play. I came back to school, I think, with 10,000 followers, like over that summer.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think. And I was trying to keep it on the low, but this lady kept coming like, girl, I seen you online. I'm like, girl, I'm cussing online. Like, I do need to keep this job. Like, chill. And it got to a point where I was like blocking administrators.
Yeah.
And I know that felt like real, but I was like, nah, y'all need to see what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But I had actually been denied a position. I wanted to be a consultant on this program called Crash Course. Crash Course is an online outlet that a lot of teachers use in high school, middle school, and in college, but it's essentially a crash course in a subject. Sometimes people watch them prepare for different tests like SATs or GREs, but they never had an African American Studies one. And somebody sent me one because I was doing things in the parking lot on Twitter. They said, hey, you should apply for this. So I applied. They told me no. But at the top of that next school year, when I had like 10K, I don't think they knew anything about me on social, so it wasn't because of that. But they said, hey, we had, someone with a little bit more credentials be the consultant, but we want you to be a writer. And so that was paying me like $600 an episode, 4 episodes a month. And I was like, oh, it's lit.
Yeah, you was like,
it's
I'll
lit.
write all
and I
day.
was like, okay, I can do this. And maybe, I want to say the week before I decided to quit, someone reached out to me and asked me to do justice and diversity inclusion training for their corporation, allowed me to set my price. And so I was literally in a situation where marking out my numbers, I could pay my bills for at least 6 months.
Sure.
And I said, well, all I need is 6 months to dedicate to this, and we'll see what happens. And, yeah.
Wow. So then tell me where did the idea come for Parking Lot Pimpin, and how did you see the space? You know what I mean? Like, cause you definitely you saw the space and you carved your lane. What was happening? Talk me through this. I'm very curious.
So June of 2020, Juneteenth, first time the nation, it's like, oh, Black people got a holiday? That's interesting. We should, in light of George Floyd, we should probably act like we have some sense and come on out. But backtracking again, anytime I would teach my kids about the civil rights movement, it would never fail. Someone would ask me, oh, Ms. Bogues, do you think we could do that again? Absolutely not. I do not think so. Because I didn't think there would ever be a reason
to have to.
Not even to have to, but for us to be on that much of an accord. Because what I don't think people realize is that in the 60s, people weren't just being like, I'm gonna march today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There were so many people affected by the same exact type of oppression that was so much louder and in your face, number one. Number two, there were people who would go and knock on doors to convince their neighbors to come out. It wasn't just based on the strength of enthusiasm and sacrifice. The Birmingham Children's Crusade happened because their parents had seen Dr. King go to jail 3 times and nothing was happening. And so their parents did not want to continue to put themselves out there, one, to be harmed, but two, to possibly lose their jobs.
Right.
And so their kids skipped school to do it themselves. So these are all the things that and like kids age kindergarten through high school, and not just, and I believe it started in Birmingham, but after the first day, first of all, the first day, kids were like packing toothbrushes because they knew they was going to jail. And it was so funny. I did a TikTok about it, and it was just like, imagine kids being like, hey man, we finna go to jail today. No, we finna do that thing today. But once the first day happened and they saw the success of it, kids would drive in 2 hours into the city to march with them. And the whole idea was to pack out the prisons, because what a lot of people don't know is it wasn't just about imprisoning Black people for demonstrating for their rights. The state made money because you had to pay bail to get people out. Yeah. But if you pack out the prisons, you actually cost the state money because they have to pay to house you and to give you the food and the clothing that they're required to or whatever. So that was really cool. But all that is to say is I didn't think there would be any reason for us to be on that much of an accord again until the untimely murder of George Floyd. And so anyway, we're out there marching for Juneteenth, and I go with the church group. And I'm very particular. You know, you got to stand up in your own activism and know what's for you and what's not for you. And things were getting precarious with the demonstrations. Things were getting dangerous in terms of looting. And I like, that's the word that it's called, but I don't like the connotation that comes with looting. But as far as people damaging property, and these are things that take place when people are so upset and angry and have no other way to express themselves. So it wasn't even those things. It was the retaliation from the state and that type of violence that made me very cautious to engage. And so I went with the white church group. My boyfriend's brother is very engaged in like a white congregation, but they actually call themselves like the One Race Movement, because even prior to George Floyd, they were very invested in breaking down the racialization that was thrown onto Christianity. Or dismantling it, rather. And so I said, okay, well, I'm gonna go with these folks. So at the very least, there is a few white people who'd be willing to take the charge before me. But we went, and we were in Centennial Olympic Park, and I want to say maybe a third of it was covered with people. I was like, oh, it's a nice sized group. We marched to the Capitol, and on our way back, there are other groups that are starting to come in. So we're marching down the main street in downtown, and there are other groups coming from side streets. And then I started to hear noise, and I'm in Georgia. Ahmaud Arbery was also just killed. And I'm just on like alert should something pop off. And people start hollering, and I turn around. People are hollering because they're saying, look behind us, look behind us. And for miles, you saw people marching.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't just Black people. It was people of all colors, creeds. And I wanted to cry because I was like, this is it. And I felt the conviction in my spirit that everything that you've done has prepared you for this moment. And so people want this information now, and it's time for you to share. And so then I started to do just a little bit of research about how people were coming online with it. And I started on YouTube, and I saw people who sat in front of their beds, or in front of their desks, or in front of a green screen. And I was like, well, how am I going to stand out? How am I going to get people to stop? What's the shock factor? And so I said, I'm doing it in my parking lot. Literally, that's it. Like, there was no huge thought process. I'm just going to the parking lot and do it. And as I was talking to you guys earlier, had I considered what that would have meant for my sound, maybe I wouldn't have made that choice, but that was that. And I was doing like 10-minute videos at first. I might have done like 2. And I was like, I'm not going to have a good reception if I'm putting things on Instagram and asking people to go to another platform. So it all has to be here. And it can't be 10 minutes, so it has to be shorter. And so I sat in the parking lot that day, And I said, well, how do I let people know that I'm going to be here for a good time, but not a long time? And so I'm going to keep it black, but I'm going to keep it brief. And here we are today.
Now tell me, I love that, and I'm so happy we just got that. But tell me about the persona, right? And it's something I love to talk to different creators about, especially folks that work in media about, is because I don't go about my day to day doing my shtick, right? But I also understand like it's a part of the brand that I have online, and I'm curious for you and like how'd you start to like cultivate, how you show up in the parking lot.
So it's a part of me. Yeah. It's, obviously just in talking here, I'm not on 100% of the time. I'm not like, jump cuts in real life. But my best friend also has a master's in African American Studies. And so we often talk to each other about what's going on in the world in this educated but homegirl kind of way. And so it was also very important to me that I communicate this information in a way that is digestible and immediately transferable to a broader community. Yeah. And what that meant was speaking to the center of the code switch.
What's the center?
It's just literally that knob that turns it. So that knob is very informed, but it's also very laid back, very colloquial. Yeah. And so making sure I infuse that type of language was important. And so I just literally used the side of me that has conversations with my friends about this and packed those 3 minutes with nothing but that in order for it to continue to keep people in. Because, I could have done like a cool cold opener and then gotten to and this is how the enslaved people came to North America. Would have been turned off so quick. And so it just had to be one of those things that it just got down to me creating a science and formula. A formula
of how you wanted to do it. About how many videos in did you start to feel like you found your pocket, where you felt like that formula was there and the response was there? The first one. The first one.
The first one. It was about 3 minutes. Yeah. It gave. Yeah.
What
I
was
look
the
back
first
on
one
it
about?
now. Black on black crime. And I used to be very I used to give a cold opener every episode. And that one said, black on black crime? Still white people's fault. And then we got into it. But it just got, and like I said, I did these things knowing that it might not get the attention from my peers that I wanted, but it actually did. And I had different people that I went to school with, like, oh, girl, you did your thing with this one. Oh, this was fire. This is crazy. And I was like, oh. But again, it's about timing. And I don't think had we been in that time, I would have gotten the response. And so I just got a lot of feedback from strangers as well, but strangers and people that I knew a little bit more closely. And I was like, oh, this is a formula that speaks to a wide array of people. And so I want to continue to employ it. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a very brilliant concept. You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of times, we think about stuff, it's like, you don't need to overthink it. But I think what's interesting about what you unpacked here is like, you're not just waking up on Friday and recording and posting a video. There's actually a lot of intent and study that's going into that. Take me through a little of your process there. So from start to finish, if you're releasing something on Friday, what's that process for you?
So I've delegated quite a bit more, but I can tell you how it was when it started. When it started, it wasn't even so heavily based on current events. It was based on a few pillars that I thought was really important to communicate to people about Black culture and Black communities. And so Tuesday, I'm picking a subject. I'm doing the research. I have a few books around me. I have a few articles on the internet, and I'm pulling together the story. And by Thursday, I have a script. Friday morning, I had this little rolly cart. I had this little raggedy rolly cart from Ross, and I would have my laptop on it. I would have my phone stand. I had a ring light that was broken, so it was just the stand part of the ring light, and this leopard chair, leopard chair that I literally bought off Facebook Marketplace when I moved into my new apartment. I was like, this is a cool chair, so let me bring it out to the parking lot. And I would drag it out there, set up, and I didn't have a teleprompter, and so I would literally be like, Black on black crime, white people's fault. And then like going back and forth, like making sure I'm reading the lines word for word because I wrote them so intentionally in order to communicate it and for it to make sense. And I was just on my iPhone. And then I would take it in. I almost forgot because I haven't edited in like 2 years.
Yeah.
But then I would take it in. I got Final Cut Pro on a 3-month free trial. And then I started to get to editing, picking my font. And so now I have actually like a team that helps me. I have a research assistant who will share what's going on in the news cycles with me on Tuesday, and I review them, and sometimes I make a case for certain things, but what I'm thinking is which one is going to be the best story, which one has the most implications for the world, and the world doesn't necessarily mean internationally, but like the world in which this thing speaks to.
The world you've built.
And so I think about those things, and then I'll say, okay, I want to do this one. Here's a couple things you should consider while doing your research, and they'll come back to me with notes about exactly what's happened, the things that I asked about specifically, but it never fails that I'm just always thinking, especially I went to grad school for it, so I'm just always thinking about the implications of it in different ways, and I'll pull up several other articles to help me complete my thoughts on it, and more often than not, I sit down on a Thursday night for a couple hours, wake up in the morning, make sure it made sense, because sometimes, it's Thursday night.
Sometimes, you've been writing and you wake up in the morning, you're like,
yeah. And now my team comes out and we have a nice little Sony A7 with a couple of eyes on the end. I don't know. I've got lighting. I've got lighting. I've got since we do it outside, I've got a diffuser. And now I got a teleprompter. Praise God.
You got that teleprompter.
In my teacup, and I do it, and sometimes it lasts with the because we also had status of teleprompters. As you know, we were able to invest a little bit more, but now I can shoot an episode like within 7 to 10 minutes. And my guy Alfredo takes it home and he edits it and sends it back to me. And what a lot of people don't know is when I started inviting guests onto my show, is that we're wrapping up the materials like a lot of the times the morning of shooting. And I felt good about that. I thought it was like an unsustainable way of doing it, but it's only been unsustainable because I've been doing it by myself and with a very minimal team for so long. But I had the opportunity to go on Charlamagne's show last year, Hell of a Week. And that's essentially how it happened. They gave me, here are the topics that we might be covering earlier in the week. The day before I got there, hey, so these are the topics that we whittled down. Here are some notes for you to do some research on them. And then literally the day of, we said, hey, so this thing might change, but we just want to know what you might say to this. And it let me know, like, oh, I'm doing it right. I'm doing how it needs to be done, especially when we're thinking of like a topical show, like a weekly topical show. And to be doing it with the small team of folks that I have. I remember I had one guest come on my show. I was really excited to have her. And it came to my attention later that she kept asking, she's like, what are all these people here for? all y'all get paid? That's crazy.
That's great.
So we are really functioning like a syndicated show. And it's crazy because I'm not getting paid for a dime. Not getting paid for any of this. It's free content.
It's free content.
But it's the sacrifice that I'm making to own my thing. Until I can make what I want that's going to get me paid.
The way you've structured it is great because it can always expand. It can always become different things. But also, you're going to create other IP. You're going to create other concepts. Were you always comfortable in front of the camera?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And my boyfriend's a photographer, and we've literally had to have time where we just set aside moments for me to do a couple poses and practice. I think I'm comfortable in front of a video camera because we're not capturing any still moments, but I'm getting increasingly more comfortable being photographed and just knowing my angles and just expressing more of that confidence piece. Yeah.
Well, and so talk me through the monetary side. I'm not trying to get all up in your business.
Cool.
But as creators, it's a part of what we do. Like we're trying to figure out how do we do what we love and pay our bills by simply doing what we love, not trying to also do 10 other things to support the one thing that we actually want to do. And so, you've grown tremendously. Are you able to monetize it? And if so, how?
So there are a few ways that I monetize. I'm able to pay my team of people monthly, given the larger campaigns I do for other companies.
Okay.
So, praise God, I'm not making the influencer money I could be making because I'm Black, because I talk about topics that could be considered sensitive, that are likely considered sensitive. So I'm not making as much. Like, I should be a millionaire.
Yeah.
I should.
Yeah,
I
facts.
should absolutely be that, but I'm not, and that's okay, because my time is gonna come.
It's gonna come.
But so I'm able to use those large campaigns to literally pay my people on a consistent basis for their work creatively, and I'm blessed to have a crew that is just like down. They're like, oh no, we see it. I actually employed a few of my old high school students, and 2 of the young men have been with me from jump, or since I said, hey, can someone come edit or come help me shoot? And they sat me down last year to have a talk because people were getting fired, and they said, we just want you to know that we're invested in the company. And when they called it the company, I was like,
oh, you was proud.
that's all I need, man. Like, that's love. But outside of those things, I did develop a community on Patreon. I'm still working on that community. And if I can get that to a sensible number, I'll be able to pay everybody regardless of the campaigns that I'm doing. Right. Very few people pay for a parking lot. I think I've sold 2 or 3 parking lots the entire 3 years I've been doing this, or I'm going on 3 years, because it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. My videos range from 400,000 to 900,000 views a week. And it's marketing dollars. So I would like to be paid for it. And I literally will tell someone no if they're not interested in coming on the price point. And it's no shade. And it's no shade. And it's really hard because, like I said, the people who really would want to be invested because they are going for the same type of messaging or causes, they don't get a lot of money to be able to invest in these things. So it's a really hard thing to do, setting my price points, and they fluctuate based on who I'm talking to. But as far as these streamers, it's 2 things that have prevented me from, I'm just not about to sell out. I'm not about to sell out. And so are 2 things, basically. 1, you're gonna pay the price point that I'm asking you for. And 2, you're not about to ask me to minimize myself so your company doesn't get any backlash.
Right,
Either
so
you
you're
stand
comfortable.
10 toes behind the message because that's what you came to me for.
Right.
Or not.
Yeah.
So, and it rarely gets to that point, but those are my 2 biggest things. Like, pay me what I'm worth, please and thank you. And you wanted this voice, so you're going to get this voice.
Tell me, speaking of your voice and the identity behind the persona, do you ever feel like, because I'm sure you have other aspirations, do you ever feel like it puts you in a box?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
I do. And it's not necessarily the persona and the voice, because I can take this anywhere because, like I said, it's very chill.
Yeah.
It's like I'm talking to anybody, so I can talk about anything. But I think because of the things I've been called to speak on, it's always advocating for something. And that is so easily linked to policy and political representatives. And I had the honor of having Stacey Abrams in my parking lot last year.
Yes.
That was such a big deal.
Yes.
And I'm so in awe of that lady. But that's because I'm a Georgian and I supported what she wanted to do for other Georgians.
Right.
And just for people in general and the types of ways she wanted to empower us. Another reason I hated politics before doing the parking lot. I rarely even talked about them or studied them, but they have everything to do with us. Like, literally our existence is shaped by policy. And so we need to know what's going on around us. But as far as aligning myself before that, I've been invited to the White House like 5 times. Not interested.
Really?
No, thank you. No. Because if we're not going to, there's no way I'm going to be on camera with anyone in the administration having a conversation if I'm not asking the questions my audience is expecting me to ask. So again, I'm not going to sell out.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is I'm not interested in boosting people's campaigns.
Clout. Yep.
Yeah. I'm not interested in being used for that reason. And while it could have been great opportunities and giving me more visibility, like visibility for what? I want to be a writer. I want to be a storyteller. That's what I'm doing. And so I just think this year I'm really going to be implementing ways to show that, like, you see me as a change agent, and yes, I absolutely am, but I am a storyteller.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it. That's how you want to be seen in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
love
want to
that.
be on screen. Like, I'm a performance arts baby, like poetry,
Yeah.
like on stage. Like, I want to be on screen, but I also want to be behind it. And I want to have a say-so in the stories. And I want to, you know, I had a show that I took out last year that was so incredible. It is incredible because we going to rework that thing.
Yeah.
And we're going to go at it again. But it was so incredible, and it was so layered and laced with things. And the approach to developing the show is the exact same approach I take to the parking lot, because people always talk about, like, man, I never would have thought of this, and this makes sense that you bring it here. But the layering was intimidating for showmakers because they wanted something very simple. And simplicity can be a good thing, which is why I took all the notes that they gave me, and I'm going to use the ones that make sense. But it was really interesting to me that it wasn't even simplicity they were looking for, it was mediocrity.
Yeah, because they wanted something that was the same that they've seen on whatever they've seen, that they can monetize. The interest in the creative seems to be last at the list, right? Like it doesn't feel like it's the priority, which is confusing.
Yeah, and it's just really interesting. Bro, like, I'm hot shit. Like, I like standing up for myself, like, I'm dope as hell, and I do things that have never been done before. Literally, I've created my own lane, so why is that not the expectation when I come to the room and create something once again that is within a school of its own?
Yeah.
And I started to say, well, you know, I definitely think it's because when they take influencers, or because that's what they see me as an influencer, when I'm actually a content creator, but, we can put this in this same medium and we can make money off of it. Just in longer form content, that's what they wanted to do. But you look at people like Issa, who started with Awkward Black Girl and created Insecure. You look at people like Quinta Brunson, who started It's a Large. Get it off for him. And now she's doing Abbott Elementary. Like, you've seen people do it. And so, you know, I get it. I haven't been in the game that long. I haven't. And so I've come to terms with the fact that I'm going to have to put in my work. But I'm just like, you know, the proof is in the pudding. Like, it's there. It's literally there.
The resume is there.
It's
very
there.
visible. You know, a lot of times what I find is, because we can talk about that all day long, right? We could talk about, I need to pay dues. I need to get these credits on my resume. I need to do this, this, and this. Why? Why? Who was around to tell me the standard of what all that I need to do? To me, I think at the end of the day, it's about my confidence in what I can do. And the fact that I have a resume that's shown that I can do these things. You get what I'm saying? Because I just can't understand. No one can really justify to me, like, you need to do it this many amount of times before you're ready. No, I decided I was ready. That's why I created the show on Instagram. You know what I'm saying? That's why I got 600,000 followers, you know, on Instagram. So to sit there and have somebody tell you that's like, you're creating an imaginary line for me. I can't compete with that imaginary line. I got to just keep doing me, because, you know, we've seen plenty of other people who have way less credentials that have opportunities. You know what I mean? And so hopefully, I do hope that can change. I do hope that, you know, by seeing you continue to do your work, that and hearing your story, that more folks are like, you know what, I'm gonna just support you right now. I don't need to wait for somebody else to validate what you're doing. I'm gonna support you right now. You know what I'm saying?
And I feel that. I really do feel like that's coming for me this year. I really do.
Yeah. I one of the things as a part of what you got coming this year, I love in your bio, you know, it says, stop playing and give your girl a show. You know, but it's also putting it out there, right?
Yeah.
But you're putting it out there, you're also putting the work in. And, you know, a lot of times
works is dead.
You can't manifest something without work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen that way. Tell me about what you hope people take from your content. When they finish on Friday, the joint that's coming on Friday, what do you hope they take away?
Empowerment is the word. Like, and we use it so often, I feel like it might be losing the power in its definition. But I remember in my master's program, It was my second semester in my master's program. I was in an African American women's history class, and we were learning about Marion J. Sims. He is the father of modern gynecology. There's a statue of him somewhere. I think it's been taken down. But he made all these waves in the science of gynecology and all these discoveries by practicing on enslaved women. Like botching enslaved women's like reproductive organs, not using any type of anesthesia, just exploring our bodies. And I looked around me inside of 4 walls that cost me $25,000 in loans. And I said, this is a setup. This is a scam. Because I had to pay so many dollars to come and learn about myself, to learn about truths that are in history books. It's available. It's,
It's there.
It's there. And I said to myself in that moment, and this is why I didn't go to a PhD program. I didn't get accepted into any of the ones that I applied to, but my program director wanted to give me an opportunity to walk on and be under his tutorship. I forget what it's called, but in a program at Boston University. And I said, I'm going to have to decline because I just wonder what this world might be like if everybody had access to this information. And I could spend the next 4 to 5 years getting more information and getting deeper into that craft. But what if it's too late by then? Time is of the essence. And I took it to teaching high school. I wanted to do an after school program so I could just focus on that.
Yeah.
But, it was intended for me to have a job. But I just knew I had a calling to share it en masse, to empower as many people as possible. And the thing is, I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. I am an educator. But I'm not so many things that would have the resources and power to act on these things. But what if the student in law school came across one of my videos and their trajectory changed? What if the teacher at this school came across one of my videos and she developed a program after school for something in particular? Like, what if a residency student came across something that, like, some type of inequity and the care Black people get, and it was like, oh, I didn't come across that yet. Like, let me do this.
Yeah.
And so, what might that impact? The ripple effect
of what you can do to empower others through your content. That's really dope.
I think is the most special thing about it. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I got one last question before we wrap up this part of our interview. There's a lot of creatives that are peers, older than us, coming up. And they might want to be the next Lynae. What advice might you have for those creatives and entrepreneurs that want to follow in your path?
Build a chair. There's, we always talk about, like, whether there's a seat at the table or creating your own table. Sometimes you got to start with building a chair. Making sure that chair is sturdy. Because can't nobody, like, knock you out of it. Can't no one take the legs from underneath you, like, if that chair is sturdy.
Oh my God. It spoke to me a lot.
Yeah.
I speak a lot about that, about like, we get obsessed about everything else. And we never just focus on like what we're actually, you articulated it as our foundation. And that to me is what our chair or our seat is. It's like, that's our purpose. So why not get that right first before we trying to get all this other stuff?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sitting with us, speaking with us. This has been wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been phenomenal.
Awesome.